First, I'm just so pleased that to be invited to give just a few thoughts of my own about Kanzi. He's been a hero of mine since I was an undergraduate many years ago. Um, I just want to highlight two key contributions. My own interests are in evolution of the brain and cognition, human brain and cognition, but not just human brains. And so they're two, not the only contributions of Kanzi. I don't mean to say these are the only things, but these are two that have been particularly fascinated by. One is this question of stone tool manufacturing, and I apologize that I wasn't able to join earlier. So if somebody has already discussed this, there'll be some overlap, perhaps. I just want to briefly mention that because it's not something that I've personally worked on myself. And then the other question has to do with linguistic abilities, and in particular, grammar, which is within linguistics, something considered to be particularly interesting about human language, and depending on who you talk to, unique or highly advanced in humans. Um, so first off, just from my own perspective about how evolution works and what we should expect. So the first thing here is that we should expect neural circuits that underlie new features, like say language abilities in humans, to evolve through the modification of things that were already there and not the sort of de novo creation of completely new things. Their completely new circuits are never likely, and even things like the transition of sea-dwelling, water-dwelling animals to land-dwelling animals involved utilizing parts of the anatomy that already existed in fish-like creatures. And anyway, so this means that the existence of, for example, language-relevant cognitive abilities in other animals should be considered the default evolutionary expectation. We should expect to find them. And so, because of my interest in trying to understand where language came from in humans, I have always been fascinated by what exactly is it that an ape brain is capable of. Granted, Kanzi was put in a very unique cultural situation compared to most of his species, but the question that he helped us understand better is what is that brain capable of? And we need to know that if we're going to try to understand and reconstruct the evolutionary history of human language and human cognition in other ways as well. So the work with Kanzi and stone tools was pioneered by my colleagues here at Indiana University, Nick Toth and Kathy Schick. And this is just a picture from a book chapter they published several years ago. But the work that they did was along these very same lines of trying to understand what is an ape brain capable of. Um, Granted in an interesting and different kind of environment, but what is it capable of? And they basically showed that that Kanzi was able to make. He understood what needed to be done. He understood and could learn how to make flakes that would open a box to get a reward. So I don't want to talk too much about that because I want to focus more on the language part that I've been more focused on in my own interest and research. But this is, I think, fundamentally important part of Kanzi's contribution. Um, this monograph has fascinated me from back when I was a graduate student, which is where Sue and colleagues basically uh, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. They challenged Kanzi with several hundred commands, and then had independent observers assessing whether he did the right thing. So he was asked to pour the milk in the Coke or other kinds of commands, other very interesting kind of novel commands, and was able to do it. And this, among other things, demonstrated that it's very clear, and I think this was clear even before Kanzi, that apes and monkeys also can learn to attach meaning to an arbitrary set of sounds in the case of language, or a symbol, which is really fundamental to language. But even more than that, they also challenged him with some um, sentences that really relied heavily on, oh, well, exclusively on word order. I guess not exclusively. He had to know the meanings of the words, but he couldn't do the right thing with those things unless he understood English word order syntax. So one of the contrasts was he was asked to pour the Coke in the lemonade, and then later pour the lemonade in the Coke. And this is exactly the same words in those two sentences. The only way he could do the correct thing is if he understand, with respect to pouring and lemonade and Coke, is if he understood the grammar. There were 20 pairs that were close to being exact sort of inverses of each other that were included. And this I found myself very convincing. But a few years ago, Clive Wynne published a critique of that work in which he called into question the coding of Kanzi's answers, and also said, well, look, he only got 57% of them correct. So sort of suggesting, but not really saying clearly, that he maybe was just guessing. Sue and Dwayne and Bill Fields published a rebuttal a year later that I think was very trenchant. And I just wanted to add to that. It struck me that you could model this whole question about these sentences as a kind of a coin flipping, as the null hypothesis. So if he's just guessing, um, for these different pairs of sentences, like the two that I showed you, um, if he's just flipping a coin, he doesn't really know, he doesn't understand the grammar at all. He's going to get, of the 20, five of the first ones correct, and five of them incorrect. And then for the repeats, he's going to get, five of those correct and five incorrect. And so you can basically, the expectations are, um, you can collapse the incorrect ones into one category there. And so the default expectation, if he's just guessing, is five both correct, 10 where one was correct and the other was incorrect, and five where they were both incorrect. His actual performance, as they reported, was much, much higher than that. But how do you assess that statistically? So again, if you just run a simulation where you essentially coin flip and find out what the distribution of possible outcomes would be, again, if he was just like flipping a coin, just guessing, and you can basically show that it's extremely unlikely that he was just guessing. We have to reject that if we're true scientists. Um, if It's true that some of the trials were not blind, and that was because apparently at the beginning he wouldn't respond appropriately or correctly unless somebody was in the room with him. Uh, Sorry, my daughter has joined us for a second. Um, um, if we throw out those non-blind trials, he's still way above chance. Clive Wynne argued that their coding was flawed, and in a paper which I reference and you can write me about, I basically go through his complaints and show that they're uh, most of the time irrelevant to the question of the grammar, which is the point of the whole of his critique. So it's kind of not really relevant. But even if we throw out those, he's still above chance. And even if we throw out the non-blind trials and the ones that Wynne complains about, still statistically significant. So anyway, I think it's totally convincing to me that Kanzi understands word order. Now, you could say, word order is just a very simple part of grammar. That's fine. It turns out, though, that it's used in every single grammatical system. There is no language on Earth that doesn't use um, um, order as a part of the meaning. Even Latin, which famously doesn't require it, it turns out word order is very important. Um, so just to summarize, human cognition didn't appear from thin air. It has an evolutionary history. From an evolutionary perspective, similar abilities that you can find in other animals, particularly our closest relatives, were the evolutionary foundations of our own abilities. That's what we should assume. That should be the default hypothesis, not that we're somehow unique and whatever we have just somehow was gained exclusively in our lineage. But we have to assume it was built from things that are much broader than just our own species and made use of. And Kanzi played a fundamental role in this and helping us understand exactly what needed to be changed. Well, not exactly, but helping us understand what needs to be different, what happened in our lineage. And just solely focusing on studying humans, which, for example, is what Chomsky is interested in his whole career, that's not going to help us with the evolutionary question because of these kinds of perspectives. So, thank you.